Hey, this is Pradeep with Sensatura. We are halfway through 2025 and I've already been seeing a lot of 25-year best of lists, and this is across different art forms, be it books, songs, movies and so forth. Even a few others have done fragrances, so I thought I would make my own list. Now, before we get to the actual list, I will just briefly explain and set up how I decided to go about this. I thought of doing 50 first, then maybe 10 niche, 10 designers, but none of that was convincing. So we have a single list of 35 fragrances, including designers, exclusives, niche, indie and so forth. I must acknowledge it is ambitious. It was hard to bring it to a level I was comfortable with. It also goes without saying, there are hundreds of thousands of fragrances that have been released over the last 25 years across the world. Obviously, I have not smelled all of them. I hope we can have an even more eclectic mix of creations from other countries as well in the future. But for now, I'm going with the familiar territory of fragrances from the West. Also, this is not based on popularity, sales or anything. There are certainly some popular fragrances here, as you can see, but it is mostly a subjective list. I have tried to take some other factors into account whenever possible, like distinctive composition, exceptional materials, cultural footprint, maybe even having a decent following, etc. Of course, based on my own life experiences and emotional resonance. It is not a ranked list. There are some other brands I considered that did not make the final cut. I will leave them in the description. A few of these I have reviewed on the channel. If not, I will at some point. I also tried to avoid some discontinued fragrances, but it just felt incomplete and wrong, so they are also in the mix. I will be more than happy to hear your own favorites. Having said all that, let's get into the list in no particular order. Starting with a few designer signature creations first. This is Terre d'Hermès, the original EDT from 2006, composed by their then in-house perfumer, Jean-Claude Ellena. This idea of having an in-house perfumer who is not from the same family is a notable trend that came about in the last 25 years. Two other creations I considered are from his Hermès creations, Osmant Yunan and Cuir d'Ange, but it has to be this one because of the sheer influence it has had on mainstream men's fragrances, plus proving to be an alternative to blue fragrances, aquatics and so forth from their competitors. This came a long way in helping Hermès come back as a fragrance brand. Still connecting threads to their past, Eau d'Hermès from Elena's mentor, Edmund Rudnitska, but also becoming the theme for the house that we are still experiencing today. In terms of scent itself, it is right in the sweet spot of what one would expect from a signature men's fragrance. It has this rindy, orange, grapefruit, mineralic, citrusy opening. There are some peppery, flinty aspects coming in, drying down to this earthy, classy, woody vetiver. It demonstrates how elevated a traditionally masculine signature fragrance can be in the last few decades. I simply adore it. I've gone through a couple of bottles. It was my signature scent at business school. It certainly lends itself to be worn. Can be worn anytime, any occasion, and it will still work. What makes Terre d'Hermès so distinctive in my mind is what it doesn't do. It is minimalistic, it is spacious and expansive because of the ISO is super. It conveys emotion through restraint. I think it has the potential to have incredible longevity in that it will likely be still relevant before or after 30 years. It's just a pinnacle of what a timeless designer signature fragrance can be. Second, if we are still getting iris incorporated in a lot of fragrances, especially targeted to men, then it is because of the Dior Homme trilogy. The one I have chosen here is the original Dior Homme EDT from 2005, composed by Olivier Polge. This broke away from the typical aquatic, fresh, woody formulas that dominated men's fragrances at that time and introduced something elegant, intimate, and quietly bold. It still has some traditional elements of a masculine fragrance, some fresh lemon, aromatics like lavender with tonka, especially the original version. Then everything is shaken up by this unapologetically powdered iris, buttery, waxy, like the smudged suede lining of a vintage makeup case. It does not go in the brittle, cold, violet direction though. The cacao brings in delicate warmth. Ambrette adds this muskiness. This sort of sleek, suited silhouette with a pinch of rock and roll thrown in became the Edes signature, which he still maintained till last year during his tenure at Celine. In some ways, a lifestyle scent, though it was radical at first, obviously because it challenges you in terms of traditional ideas of masculine fragrances by using iris and powdery accords. But now it's very much loved. I don't want to be without a bottle of it, just for the type of presence it creates. Third, let's do another designer. This time it's from Cartier. This one came out in 2016, a time when the big blue theme had sort of taken over the mainstream men's fragrance scene. This tried to do something quite different from that, and as a result, this did not do particularly well. In fact, it has been discontinued, sadly. This is L'Envol de Cartier, Eau de Parfum version, composed by the renowned perfumer Mathilde Laurent. Even the presentation has so much thought put into it. L'Envol means flight or to take off in French. Appropriately, it comes in this ampoule-looking bottle held by this thin glass dome structure which keeps the fragrance suspended. You can still find it for a decent price online. In a parallel timeline, this would have been celebrated as one of the best signature fragrances. The spark in this composition is honey, though the fragrance itself does something more than that overall. Honey-scented fragrances for men have been done before, usually with lots of heavy elements, be it spices, leather, oak moss, animalics and such. Boss No. 1, Cool Rose, even the Original Gentleman are some of the ones that come to mind. This to me redefined that genre for the more fashion-forward, aesthetic-driven population of the 2010s. I also find it to have this deliberate unisex quality to it. In some ways like Dior Homme, it is inspired by hydromel, which is this fermented honey beverage consumed notably by the Greeks. It opens with this combination of lightly ozonic violet, herbal sage and lavender, just teasing to be a fougere before fully going into the honeyed territory. It's done in this airy, transparent, lucid manner. I just keep reaching for it, especially because of that. Underneath everything is some nondescript woodiness. There is some clean patchouli, even a touch of powder from the iris and the violet. Of course, a generous amount of musks. It even has this beautifully abstract, golden, silky, embellished outlook while still being playful. Just simply brilliant, deserved much more appreciation. Number 4, let's go to the first designer exclusive on the list. Another trend where many legacy designer brands launched their high-run collections. And one of the most spellbinding launches in that category was Tom Ford's Private Blend. Many great creations from Noir de Noir to Tobacco Oud. The one I have chosen is Tuscan Leather from 2007, composed by Harry Fremont and Jacques Cavalier. This is the first private blend fragrance I smelled, and it left quite the impression on me. I then purchased a 30 ml and went through that fairly quickly. It made this specific style of doing fruity leathers very popular. It has this tart, fruity raspberry, along with spicy saffron, some resinous facets in there as well. Then this acrid, angular, metallic overture dissolves to this primal, muscular, yet suave scent. It is this car interior style of smoky, ashtray leather. It's rich, it's ruinous, certainly has a bold silhouette. In some ways intentionally old-fashioned, and I love that about it. It was one of the first niche adjacent designer scents to make leather aspirational again. It has been copied over and over, which is another ever-increasing trend. To this day, any fragrance has raspberry and leather in the notes. One cannot stop thinking of this. That's how recognizable it has become. Nothing short of exceptional, a true benchmark leather. Alright, from number 5, let's do some niche fragrances, starting with a creation from one of the best perfumers of this generation, Bertrand Duchaufour. Amouage as a brand really took off during this time. Now it is probably the most popular luxury brand. The one I have chosen is easily my favorite from the brand. This is Jubilation XXV from 2007, created to mark their 25th anniversary under the creative direction of Christopher Chong. It starts off with a signature blackberry note, dissolving to the holy trinity of resins, myrrh, opopanax, and of course the Omani frankincense. It is warm, spicy, gilded, naturally sweet from the balsams, easily one of the most regal, layered, orchestral compositions that I have come across. It essentially reminds me of some distant Middle Eastern royal court. I think the real achievement of the perfumer is bringing that image to normalcy as much as possible. It is still being respectful to the majesty, the mysticism, and the myth of the region. It is also not a stereotypically heavy scent. It managed to wear like some sort of armor, balancing sacred and sophisticated. It is the scent I have worn the most during many celebratory occasions, galas, weddings, and so forth. Pretty much whenever I dress up. It is one of the few fragrances I would consider to be a true magnum opus. At number 6, let's do another historically important niche brand, L'Artisan Parfumeur. It is one of the brands which enabled me to go and explore scents outside of big designers. They have been around since the 70s, so that already means we are not considering many of their older creations. I thought of the usual suspects, Timbuktu, Zing, Dzonka, Traversée du Bosphore, and so forth. Very good creations. The one I have selected may not be as popular, but it is the one with which I have a lot of personal resonance. I also know quite a few other people who feel that way. This is Saffron Troublon from 2002, created by Olivia Jacobetti. Of course, this tackles one of my favorite aromatic spices in a way that is familiar to me, saffron, very expensive material. When I first smelled fragrances from Western brands that supposedly have a saffron note, I was quite taken back. It was used in this particular dry, leathery, plasticky, spicy style, something I wasn't used to at that time. Of course, now I have smelled many more variations with regards to its usage. But here it is used in this sort of creamy, custardy, rosy, comforting manner, which really makes me think of the smell of saffron, as I knew growing up. It does have a gourmand dimension to it, but still elegant. Reminds me of some Indian desserts and such, and by that way, evocative of Persian, Turkish, even some Middle Eastern delicacies too. They frequently have desserts with saffron, rose-scented water, cream, and so forth. It certainly tackles a particular mood and memory for me. There's a prominent, incisive rose note, which somehow captures the idea of saffron threads, smoothened by the sandalwood. This saffron creamy color on the bottle comes through as well when smelling it. So I guess in that sense, it is troubling, a sort of nostalgic way, rather than a negative emotional way. There's a superb harmony to this composition. It does not overwhelm, not too sweet or strong. It's truly a nostalgic whisper in the form of a perfume. At 7, speaking of bridge building brands, let's go to Histoires de Parfums, another brand which I used to pick up from discounters during my first foray into niche fragrances. I own 5 of them, including the Amber, the Patchouli, Fidelis, and so forth. Great value, similar to Etat Libre d'Orange in some ways, especially the 120 ml. The one I have chosen is my favorite, probably the most recognized from the brand. It is 1740 Marquis de Sade, composed by Sylvie Jourdet. This French marquis is a very controversial figure known for his violent and gruesome literary work. The word sadism comes from his name, and the year 1740 denotes his birth year. Accordingly, the scent is this dark, spiced, faintly dangerous smelling composition. It starts off with this rich, boozy, sweet Davana note, usually paired with rum. Lots of spicy, herbal, medicinal aspects come in. There's something theatrical about it all. It dries down to this smoky, chewy, crackling leather, backed up by the smoky labdanum, scratchy patchouli, and a hint of vanilla. Some immortelle, giving these scorched, tobacco-like attributes. There is some old, creaking woody accents to it. It can be too much at first, but somehow also makes you feel comfortable. Maybe even indulgent after a while. In some ways, leaning into the mythos of this character. But again, that's where I would draw the line between the art and the artist. It is daring, provocative, and yes, maybe even a little perverse, yet somehow refined. Still a memorable release after 25 years. Next, going to the brand of Diptyque. I enjoy a few of their creations. It is almost like wearing a particular ambience as a scent. They are candle makers after all. Still, I would be hard-pressed to call them exceptional or life-changing. But this one sort of embraces this aesthetic of the brand to the fullest and as a result takes it to a new height. There is no other fragrance from the brand I would consider instead. This is Belgian Bohème from 2015, composed by the late Olivier Pechot. Firstly, this is one of the stylistically striking bottles that I have. It's a shame that they have moved it to a normal bottle. This is supposed to create the ambient scent of their flagship boutique, located at 34 Boulevard Saint-Germain in Paris, imagining a resident who lives there. It does this by using benzoin, one of the most underappreciated resinous notes, especially as being the centerpiece. It is this warm, comforting, golden haze of a scent, sort of oscillates from being resinous to creamy to powdery to balsamic over the day. It feels like an artist's apartment with candles, old books, antique varnish, trinkets, soft curls of incense swirling toward the painted walls. Very evocative. It is also powdery, vanillic, just the right amount of sweetness underpinning the sandalwood, a small hint of an old-fashioned dandy, but still contemporary and bohemian. It has this kind of being carefree, wandering sensation to it. Maybe even a bit lazy, being indoors with a book or a violin or something. Simply sensational. We don't get as many scents which have a real sense of charm and comfort, especially these days. This is easily one of the best in that class. Simply tranquility in a bottle. At number 9 is another independent brand that played an important role in elevating classical French perfumery at the turn of the century, MDCI. The last decade or so has not been the best for them, but they seem to be getting ready for something new this year. Hopefully they can come back strong. The fragrance I have chosen is another creation by Bertrand Duchaufour. From 2012, this is Chypre Palatin. It's a very grand, multifaceted, spectacular neoclassical composition. There's a sense of gilded regality here, but also this velvety, mossy earthiness. It is offset by a beautiful amber oriental dimension. Additionally, I get this prominent plum note concerning the fruity side, this sort of greenness from the florals and the galbanum. There are also spicy, aromatic aspects to it. It brings a growling presence. The sense of unease, tension that good Chypre fragrances have is also there. It's rich, opulent. There are small embellishments everywhere. It certainly has this sense of grandeur, and yet it's not stuffy like some of those old school Chypre fragrances. Somehow all this complexity is held together in a cohesive fashion. It never feels like anything here is misjudged. It is kind of like reading a dense novel with exquisite prose. Just a spectacular creation. I prefer this over Invasion Barbar as being the best of the brand of MDCI. Duchaufour has created many great compositions, but this is his best of the best. At number 10, let's do a brand which in essence set the bar for indie perfumery in the 2000s. This is Tower Perfume's Lone Star Memories from 2006. Leather is one of perfumery's historically significant accords. Over the years, it has been interpreted in many styles. And in this case, the reference leans towards Spanish leather. What sets this particular fragrance apart though is its storytelling. I have always had a deep enthusiasm for westerns, but I never imagined a fragrance could bridge that world and scent so seamlessly. But here it is, a cowboy ballad in a bottle. It just vividly captures this image of a lone cowboy finishing his day. He is just settling down for the evening after work. There is the worn leather jacket, jeans, boots, his horse nearby, and a campfire crackling as dusk settles. I just get a lot of enjoyment coming back to this again and again. The leather here is dark, animalic, and charred, almost black, yet there is a worn-in human warmth to it, especially brought out by an indolic jasmine that helps to soften the edge without erasing its grit. The perfumer's sun-blasted amber signature adds texture and depth. There is also some aromatic geranium and clary sage, which introduced a contrasting cleanliness. It's easily one of the strongest olfactive narratives that I've ever encountered. Speaking of tower perfumes, narratives, and sand, this list would be incomplete without L'air du désert marocain. This time it's another landscape. The setting is in Morocco. The desert air, the souk, the incense, It is like a still life capture of that region. It's not pretty exactly, more so beautiful. It feels meditative and not harsh. You get the spice bazaar accord, coriander, cardamom, along with florals like jasmine, only experienced through this dry air. After that, it's just the honest texture of resins and woods, labdanum, cedar, vetiver, aged sandblasted amber with dust. The edges are dry, but somehow the fragrance is still radiant. Other ambers usually tend to paint a picture, whereas this one seems to just take your hand and bring you there. This way of creating atmosphere is why I love it, why it was monumental, and why it was a pathbreaker. At number 12, going to the house of Le Labo, certainly one of the most influential niche brands of the last couple of decades. Irrespective of whether one likes their products or not, the sheer impact they have had, be it bringing this sort of neutral, minimalistic, industrial aesthetic to their boutiques, bottles, the way they name their fragrances and whatnot, is undeniable. This 2006 fragrance I have, still to this day, the only Le Labo I own, Patchouli 24 by Annick Minado. I have always liked the idea of smoke. In fragrance form, Comme des Garçons Black had been my reference until I got to this one. Nowadays, seemingly every indie brand has a smoky fragrance, but I find a lot of them to be taking things too far, trying to be provocative. But this for me strikes the fine balance between taking the smoky, dark, tarry, chewy, greasy aspects just to the optimum level, while still being an engaging wearing experience. The birch tar is backed by incense and styrax, which adds to the smoky, resinous quality of the scent. Quite a base notes heavy scent structure. It's kind of ashy, earthy, pungent, comforting charcoal-like smell. There is also some vanilla, which balances out the smokiness with the sweetness. It is primarily a birch tar scent. Patchouli and leather are just illusions here. I particularly like the contrast in this one. It has this rough, rugged, raw outlook on one side, but on the other side, it is quite enigmatic. There's a sense of charm and comfort. It is not depressing or monotonous like many other smoky fragrances. The other subject of contrast is coming across old-fashioned and futuristic. One minute, it's like an old, black-lacquered, ancient, gothic apartment, and the next, as if you're living in Sin City or Mad Max or some dystopian future. To me, it also shows the range of the perfumer, from Hypnotic Poison to Jaipur to Bois d'Argent to this, simply sensational. Next is a brand that really demonstrated by 2010 that a perfumer-owned house can be successful. Today it can be argued whether it's a victim of its own success, but that doesn't take away from the fact that they had some really great creations in the beginning. Some of them have been discontinued, but fortunately this one has returned. Of course, I'm talking about Absolu pour le Soir by Maison Francis Goujon. This was very captivating with its honeyed benzoin rose accord deepened into something more smoldering and sensual. Sadly, it did not seem to catch on commercially and was discontinued. Fast forward to 2024, we had 4 of these reissues housed under a collection called My Very Intimate Perfumes. The scent itself is a warm amber oriental, syrupy, rich and enveloping. Honey comes first, folded into benzoin and a musky rose, while Grand Soir, its more well-known sibling, leans sweeter. This one has more of a musky warmth and cumin, which brings in the carnal aspects, really sending the message that evening is a time for seduction. There is certainly a resinous golden luminosity here, and this overall waxy floral texture. There is also incense and labdanum with sandalwood softening the edges. Eventually settles into this musky, powdery, and faintly candle wax-like scent. It is really like the golden hour and beyond bottled as a fragrance. I think it is Goujon's best creation, not only for MFK, but of all time. Next, I wanted to have one fragrance to address an important phenomenon within the Western fragrance industry during the last 25 years, which is of course the oud craze. Obviously M7 from Yves Saint Laurent came to mind, but I decided to go with the fragrance that uses real oud. Again, I thought of the Nuit from Frederic Malle, but ultimately went with the creation from another great house. This is Rouad from Parfum d'Empire. As for the timing within the oud craze, this came out just a couple of years ago. Some thought Marc-Antoine Corticchiato was late to the party because of that. But I think he delivered something that is not only a good oud fragrance, but is also using it to express his passion for the equestrian way of life, his Corsican heritage, even his brand as a whole, considering this seems to be a culmination of many notes, scent profiles that he likes. The scent starts off quite bold and in your face with a lot of Vietnamese oud, sort of like an analogy to the name Ruad, which means the kick of a horse. Then you have the agrestic, animalic, pungent oud facets coming in. It is joined by even more countryside evoking notes, once again showing his love for materials like immortelle, hay, cumin and such. A primal, muscular, balmy, chestnut-like brown leather and narcissus with an undertone of labdanum. It really brings home this horsey scent, which is probably my favorite theme at the moment. It is in fact inspired by the perfumer's own equestrian life, especially the scent of horses post-competition. I have read that some cavaliers don't change their clothes immediately after the competition because they like that smell so much. This tries to paint that picture, evoking sensations of horse hooves, mane, sweaty saddle, tar, wax and so forth. Essentially the aura of a living, perspiring, majestic beast. It is not an out-and-out oud fragrance per se. In fact, the other elements, especially the rich floral attributes of narcissus and jasmine, play a major role along with the oud. I like that it's not glorifying the oud, even with its name. Also, thankfully, it's not a rose-oud combo. More so trying to convey an idea using the oud. For me, this is the best Western oud with real oud since the night. Almost halfway through the list, next is a fragrance from a luxurious legacy crystal maker who have been around since the 1800s. But this fragrance is from 2006. Its acclaim would only build and build over the years. As a result, it has become the most memorable, affordable fragrance of this era. Of course, I'm talking about Encre Noire from Lalique, composed by Nathalie Lorson. The funny thing is, technically it's not a cheap fragrance. You can still see it at retail for over 100 euros. It's just that it's been regularly available at discounters for a long time. You can find this EDT version for somewhere between 20 and 35 euros. And for that price, this is a lot of fragrance. It is one of the first French fragrances I bought with so much excitement and just had this pure, unadulterated admiration for in the early days. Saying it has been talked about a lot would be an understatement. It's pretty much guaranteed to be there on any list of affordable fragrances. As for the scent, it's a vetiver. Particularly, as the name would imply, it tries to explore the darker, inky, earthy aspects of vetiver. The aromatic cypress gives just enough lift for things to get going. Huge dose of musks, cashmere, supporting the woody, enigmatic vetiver with the proceedings. There is this cascading calligraphy sort of inflection to it. It really helped establish vetiver as an important note for the postmodern era, especially because of what has since come to be known as niche attributes, only built into an affordable fragrance. It is sleek, lacquered and mysterious. Many other fragrances considered as competition have come and gone, but this one is still at the top, one I will always own. Number 16, let's go to a Chanel fragrance. This is from their Lace exclusive collection, which would become one of the most revered among designers. I have a couple of my all-time favorites from this. It has become the cornerstone of French perfumery in recent years. The fragrance I have here is named after the address of their flagship boutique. Of course, it is 31 Rue Cambon from 2007, composed by Jacques Polge and Christopher Sheldrake. This is a radiant, couture take on a floral woody chypre, in a style unique to Chanel, and this collection particularly. Not a lot of fragrances have done this classic family of perfumes with this sort of elevated yet restrained sensual outlook. It starts peppery, lemony, leading to the classic floral bouquet of rose, jasmine, ylang, drying down to this musky, creamy patchouli base. Everything is anchored by the buttery orris, and it is one of the best applications of iris/orris. They openly state there is no oak moss here. It does not go for the drama, instead keeping its poise. But beyond all that, the real beauty is that it's wonderfully abstract. Instead of individual florals, I get what feels like a floral scent with an expensive dress, skin, and some sweat for good measure. I mentioned a couple of times how this is like a supermodel after a ramp walk. Really enigmatic, one of the true pillars of this collection. Let's do an underrated Italian designer brand next. The one I appreciate the most is just their eponymous fragrance, Bottega Veneta Eau de Parfum from 2011, composed by Michel Almerac. Yes, it was marketed to women, but that shouldn't stop anyone from enjoying this great fragrance. It is a leather sheep. Imagine a designer brand making that as a signature fragrance in 2025. It has this plummy, peachy departure with hints of spiciness, revealing this mossy sheep leather. It is not a smoky, resinous, dry leather, more so a velvety, soft, supple suede. The brand is a leather goods manufacturer after all. Accordingly, it's a soft, tactile leather supported by florals like the waxy jasmine and this somehow elevated oak moss and patchouli, all adding to the sheer fabric style of leather. In fact, I feel like this is a nod to their intrecciato style that they introduced in the 60s. It is where their artisans weave thin strips of leather in this specific lattice pattern, which was unique from a design form factor perspective. It is to this day their signature. Similarly, the proportions of different facets here are just brilliant. Nothing goes overboard, not too fruity, floral or leathery. Just this gentle, supple leather gloves meddling into fabric and skin. It certainly brings some attitude. There is also a nod to the past, but still it is very much modern. A truly great achievement in terms of reinvention. Of course, the same perfumer did Gucci Pour Homme, which was on my shortlist. At number 18, technically a designer brand, but one with avant-garde sensibilities. It was very exciting discovering the sheer variety of scent profiles they explored since I got into the hobby. There are multiple collections of fragrances with different themes, scent profiles and so forth, still within the affordable price bracket. The one I have chosen is from their Monocle series, released in 2008. This is Scent 1 Hinoki by Antoine Maisondieu. The others I considered were Black and a couple from their Incense series, but ultimately decided to go with this one. This is again my second bottle of the fragrance. It was among my first scents that I picked up from Comme des Garçons. I have been told by people in the industry that this has not only inspired other fragrances, but also increased the popularity of these Zen, woody, Asian-inspired home scents and other aroma products. It has this fascinating duality, cool and warm all at once. There is the brisk green mountain air feel from the cypress, of course with the icy camphor turpentine edge. Balancing that is a warmer, steamy aroma like stepping into a bath. Faint trails of incense in the background. Monocle magazine has sections dedicated to lifestyle, aesthetic decor and home products. For a first collaboration, they have done a very impressive job here in regards to their creative direction. It's immersive, it's atmospheric, does not go into the spa-like hotel or home fragrance territory. The Hinoki brings its own unique qualities, earthy, verdant, slightly medicinal with a gentle aromatherapeutic vibe. In this fragrance, it's been rendered in a modern, wearable, contemplative way. It is more accessible than some of the other Comme des Garçons fragrances. The other three scents from the Monocle series are also strong, but this one stands out for me. Next, another underappreciated niche brand. This particular fragrance though was another bridge builder for me in terms of exploring creations past the designer area. It was also one of the most discussed niche fragrances a decade ago. This is Idole de Lubin from 2005, composed by Olivier Jacobetti. This in a lot of ways took the spicy, sweet, boozy, ambery, gentleman's club style of fragrances to the next level. It has this rum sunset cocktail accord with bitter orange, sugar cubes, and a gourmand edge. There is also spicy saffron, which sets the stage for this bold, muscular leather that comes in the dry down. It's very ambery, resinous, lots of incense, all settling down on this dry, dark, brown ebony wood, which gives this a lot of attitude. If it had stopped there, it would have been just another brutal, masculine scent. But to me, this also works at a more abstract level because of the way Olivier Jacobetti has constructed this. It's like opening an apothecary, old world wooden case, filled with spices, alcohol, leather gloves, and whatnot. Even designer fragrances have taken reference from this, including the very popular, affordable Bentley for Men Intense, which in hindsight introduced a lot of people to this one on Chambre Noire by Olfactive Studios. These three fragrances used to be compared all the time. The brand itself deserves more recognition. They have some other well-done compositions like Acqua, Galade, and Corrigan, but this is the best I've come across in this style. There is exoticism and adventure, but still a classy, nocturnal, masculine scent, just balanced to perfection. Next is a brand that explores Indian culture, history, and heritage through the lens of French perfumes. In spite of not having a large collection, they have become one of my favorite brands. From 2014, this is Ashoka from Nila Vermeer Creations. Composed by Bertrand de Chauffour once again. He has made all the mainline fragrances for them. Trahi or Mohor could have also made the list. All three are very strong. It starts with a commanding, almost insistent interplay of woody suede leather, some soft, lush green fig, and an extraordinarily lifelike, spongy, sappy lotus accord. This may make it sound like a Mediterranean scent, but to me it comes across more so spiritual. Obviously there is some undercurrent of ceremonial incense. There is almost this vegetal spiciness at times. It eventually settles down on this tranquil, meditative sandalwood. It is a recurring theme in some of the fragrances from the brand. They also use cardamom, incense, and myrrh in many of their creations. These perfumes also seem to have demanded a new style from Duchefaux's side, and I think he does some of his best work here. To me, this fragrance in particular resonates deeply. It's a masterful convergence of Indian historical ethos with the refinement of French perfumery. Number 21 is a brand which has brought in a new standard when it comes to raw materials used in perfumery. They have their own lab where they do research and come up with new ways of extraction, synthesis, and so forth. Plus, they are mostly transparent with the customer, which is a rare thing in perfumery. The house is Les Indémodables, and the fragrance is Vanille Van from 2020, composed by Antoine Lee. It doesn't go for the usual traits of vanilla. It brings in this bitter, chewy tobacco, lots of dried fruits stewed in booze, additional richness from cacao, and this tactile leather supporting everything. The vanilla itself does not go in the pastry shop, cakey direction. It is this rich, multifaceted, dark vanilla. In some ways, the archetypical sweet tobacco fragrance. Much more robust, shadowed, and textured than many others in the market. You know, some of us have certain notes that we think we love so much, but we have never found a fragrance that does it in the way that you imagine it to be in your mind. I have a couple of those. Honey, turmeric, yuzu. Tobacco used to be one of them until I found this. It is like looking at an LED TV after owning a CRT. All the materials are in high definition, vivid. There is so much clarity in the composition. Quite a few of their fragrances don't work for me, as they tend to end up being purely material showcase pieces. But this is where everything seemed to have worked out well. The good materials come together as a holistic composition. The components are multifaceted. Of course, it's a naturally appealing scent profile that has been done before by a lot of brands. So it is very difficult to stand out. And this does it by elevating the scent profile to a new level. And you had Antoine Lee, who came in with new energy at the top of his game. It's a rarity when all these pieces come together for a creation. It has also helped them break into the mainstream audience, obviously bringing in positive business. The brand also knows how important it is. That's why there is already a fourth flanker on the way. But for me, the original is one of the most memorable releases of the last 5 years. Alright, we are going to Australia next to visit a small independent brand from a headwear maker. Just like the noir theme of the brand, the fragrances are statement makers. They deal with dark themes using this recurring signature of smoke. The brand is Naime Gutsa and the fragrance is Nuit de Bakelite from 2017, composed by Isabelle Doyen of Annie Goutal fame. It is inspired by early 20th century Bakelite jewelry that Naomi is fond of. Right from the beginning, it smells like some kind of tempting, forbidden, poisonous, mythical concoction. Very herbal, vegetal, green and camphoraceous. The main idea here seems to be the exploration of the sinister green side of tuberose rather than the optimistic white floral side. There's a rubbery, plasticky, latex nuance initially. As it dries down, we get these smoky, leathery aspects coming in, a lot of ashtray, dark woods. It even gets this peculiar texture, sort of like some old, scruffy, expensive carpet. Definitely feels vintage inflected. But at the same time, like some sort of futuristic garden, there is a subtle animalic current running underneath it all. It's ghostly, witchy. It's like a garden with plants that have claws and teeth. Not an easy wear whatsoever. Something visceral about it. But when you are in a mood for haunting fragrance, this works beautifully. I also like the fact that it subverted my expectations because I don't always click with tuberose in fragrances, just like jasmine. I would rather smell the real flowers. But there are exceptions, and this is one of them. I like that it showed me that I can still appreciate such a scent profile. A truly remarkable fragrance from an equally remarkable brand. Next is a fragrance that tackles a similar theme, but in a much more optimistic way. It is a Swiss brand which had a strong following early on, but has since faded due to low distribution, also as a result of the passing of the perfumer. To me, this brand deserves to be in the same conversation as the other Swiss brand, Tower Perfumes. This is Mito Wall d'Extrait from Bogue Profumo, composed by Vero Kern. This is a radiant, verdant, floral creation. Lots of sappy green galbanum, citrus peels, fleshy champaca and hyacinth, all underpinned by oak moss and patchouli. Obviously, there's an homage to classic floral sheeper fragrances, but this comes together as its own contemporary composition. Extremely rich and complex. It's like a classic epic unfolding layer by layer. Not sure how they achieved this sort of density in a 2013 release with all these restrictions and material bans. Despite its inherent density, it retains this sort of luminosity and uplifting quality, never veering into anything murky or overly earthy. The result is nothing short of striking. It truly evokes this vivid impression of a Mediterranean garden at daybreak, dewy, green and radiant, an ideal example of a retro-modern chypre done right. This is another one that stands out as some of the most accomplished compositions that I have ever encountered from an independent perfumer. Speaking of independent brands, next we are going to an Italian indie brand, Bogue Profumo. It is the creation of Antonio Gardoni, a self-taught perfumer who happens to be an architect by profession. His career transition is nothing short of extraordinary. This brand has a devoted following, particularly around its celebrated musky animalic chypre, Mai. However, the fragrance that has captivated me the most is Mem. It would initially come across like an experimental, daring interpretation of the classic fougere. But the more I have worn it, it has almost become this puzzle. This is lavender in stereo, sharp, herbal, almost medicinal. But then later, it also happens to be green, sweet, candied and metallic. It's used in multiple ways here and it clearly shows. Possibly the best lavender that I have come across. But it does not stop just there. It keeps shifting and moving. There is vintage-esque florals, resins, some kind of rubbery leather, obviously some animalics, beeswax and earthy moss coming in later. There is an inherent beauty to it, but it is also unsettling. The lavender morphs, threads itself through the structure till the end. It's just like a fever dream of a fragrance. I've come to associate the wearing experience with a film by one of my favorite directors, Blue Velvet by David Lynch. If you haven't seen that film, try to catch it. If like me, you love this fragrance. At number 25 is another independent brand from the UK. Coincidentally, this came out in the same year as Mai from Bogue, 2014. That is also to say, these two brands have played an important role in the wave of indie artisan perfumery in the mid-2010s. This is the brand's debut release. It used to be the perfumer's personal scent before it was named and released. This is Anubis from Papillon Artisan Perfumes, composed by Liz Morse. This uses notes that are appealing to me naturally, leather, incense, amber, which has been done before. But what stands out here is the way they come together. It is very distinctive, especially this balmy texture which is maintained throughout. Everything is anchored by rich, old-fashioned incense, suede leather and golden amber. It truly fits this mysterious theme of ancient Egypt. There is also additional elements like jasmine which helps to soften the edges. This particular lotus note, it's difficult to capture this waxy, spongy smell it has, like I said with Ashoka. This one does it equally well, only going for the darker side. Of course, woody and ambery too. It has this sense of resilience to it, like an armor that cannot be penetrated. Salome from the brand is more popular. I like that one as well. But this blend, especially the leather accord, is what really settles this to be my favorite from the brand and one of the best artisan fragrances in recent times. For 26, let's come back to the designer side. It's the second one from Hermès. Released in 2016, this was the first standalone creation by their current in-house perfumer, Christine Nagel. I believe Jean-Claude Ellena was still there helping with the transition, but a lot was riding on this release. I'm talking about Galop de Hermès. Firstly, this stirrup bottle is an artistic achievement by itself, made by Philippe Mouquet. How many designers do a single unique fragrance with its own bottle and signature that is not part of a collection, does not have flankers and so forth? Not a lot. Certainly none of the big legacy brands in recent times. That is one of the reasons, along with quality and consistency, I consider Hermès to be the best designer house as of today. The scent itself is a duet of leather and rose. This theme was having a moment around the mid-2010s. The leather is this refined, graceful handbag style of leather inspired by their own doubly calfskin leather. Just a whiff of a horse saddle. The rose is sort of modernist, metallic, radiant, which would become part of the perfumer's signature. There is this starchy, fruity quince note and spicy saffron, both complementing the leather and the rose. It ever so slightly hints at being a Middle Eastern style of fragrance, before swiftly going in the French direction. Lots of references happening here to other fragrances from Ellena and Nagel herself. But at the end of the day, it is its own fragrance. Some floral aspects from the osmanthus and hawthorn, contrasting and sustaining the leather. When this was released, the pressure was high. The idea to capture the heritage of the brand, to be in line with the already established house signature by Ellena, also bringing in a new signature as the new perfumer. On top of all that, being a well-composed, standalone fragrance. And I think we got not only the best of this perfumer, but one of the best of the brand with Galop. Number 27, we are doing a second Dior on the list, this time from their Collection Privée. This was part of the original trilogy, creatively directed by Eddie Slimane, composed by a perfumer who wasn't in-house. They were all initially created as eau de colognes. This is Bois d'Argent from 2004, once again composed by Annick Minardo. It was the first Dior Privé fragrance I ever acquired. Here they have crafted what I consider a truly disruptive signature. It reimagines notes traditionally seen as weighty or rustic. It goes in this totally unexpected direction by bringing in transparency to these resins, anchored by iris, which truly elevates the entire composition. As the name suggests, it's silvery, papery, resinous, smell of currency between the pages of a book. The opening is crisp with juniper and cypress. Then the beautifully constructed resinous facets come in, rounded off by a touch of honey and powdery iris. It's very intricate, at once intellectual and emotive. It has rightly earned its devotional following in France, having even found its way into pop culture, name-dropped in lyrics and referenced all the time. In this case, the cult status is wholly deserved. It remains not only my favorite from Dior, but one of my most treasured fragrances of all time. I will happily get a replacement bottle when this is done. Naturally, it claimed the top spot in my ranking of Dior Privé collection. Extremely timeless in its aesthetic. I have said this before, if Dior were to call a fragrance heritage, it would be Bois d'Argent. 28, let's go to the legendary house of Guerlain. They were fully under the direction of LVMH in the last 25 years. Their collection, new releases, positioning, everything has been going through a lot of changes. Overall, my true love is always going to be for the classics, some of the best perfumes in the world. Having said that, I also like a few creations from the 2000s. The one I have chosen is the first Guerlain I purchased. This is L'Instant de Guerlain Pour Homme Eau de Parfum from 2005, which of course is the second iteration of Pour Homme Extrême or Lidge. The actual bottle I first purchased was the rimmed EDT bottle. I wore that one a lot years ago, both composed by the late Béatrice Piguet. This was their pillar men's creation for some time, I believe after Héritage. I think in between they had Chamade Pour Homme, which didn't do well. There are two reasons why I think this fragrance is special. Of course, apart from it being my first purchase, the memories I have with it and so forth. It is the transitions. It's a true masterclass in how to manage different elements within a fragrance. The way it moves seamlessly from the bright citrus opening to the anistic aspects and further drawing down to this warm, dusty cacao, sandalwood and patchouli. There are smoky resinous touches, floral aspects that weave in and out. The entire dynamic of the fragrance I find to be captivating, simply phenomenal. Second reason being, this is one of the last releases from Guerlain which still had a signature close to the original thematics of the brand, including the Guerlainade. Because just after this, we had the launch of the Arts and Materials collection. In between there were a few releases, Homme for instance, which again didn't do well. Most of the later releases go for the sweet scent profiles like vanilla, cherry, tonka and whatnot. And that signature extended to their new pillars, L'Homme Idéal, Petite Robe Noire, Mont Guerlain and such, even to the Shalimar and Habit Rouge flanques. Some of them work, some of them don't. But the point is, that is what their signature has morphed into today, and we are still living it. So in a way, I sort of see this as an epilogue to the classic phase of Guerlain. Now let's look at another one from the brand. A couple of new collections were launched in the 25 years. The Absolu d'Orient, which had some disruptive creations like Encens Mythique. Then like we said, the Arts and Materials collection, which catapulted them to the exclusivity game. When I think what represents this transformation of the brand, only one composition keeps coming to my mind, and that is 68 from 2013, composed by Thierry Vasser. More specifically, it's called Le Parfum 68, as it followed the Cologne du 68. I want that too, but I prefer this version. For those who may not be aware, this was launched to commemorate the reopening of their flagship boutique at the address of 68 Avenue Champs-Élysées in Paris. As for the scent itself, it weaves threads from the past compositions of the house, the powdery, heliotrope, iris, bergamot signature, and the current day benzoin, tonka, vanilla-filled concoctions. Except for the sweetness, and still makes it work beautifully. 68 does not stop there, it goes even further, bringing its own properties like some warm, spicy, immortelle, soft suede leather, and so forth. Extremely complex. I remember a sales associate telling me how this was made as an experiment to use all the possible materials. Lots of creations since then have been made as an extrapolation of this. You can certainly see why when wearing it. At that time, the response was mixed. Some Guerlain fans liked it, including myself. Some others thought it was too complex or confused, trying to bring in a lot of things into a single perfume. But years later, it has been getting appreciated more and more, and deservedly so. It's not simply an homage perfume, it's an exquisitely made creation in its own right. To me, it's a souvenir that represents everything about Guerlain the last 25 years. Next is a bit of a controversial one, especially considering the kind of fragrances on the list before, but I will try and explain my thought process. This is Ganymede from 2019 from Marc-Antoine Barrois, composed by the most wanted perfumer on the planet today, Quentin Biche. Nowadays, it has gotten some kind of infamous reputation. Givaudan and their perfumers have brought in a lot of business. Quentin Biche has essentially been put in a box where he will probably be made to create different versions of this fragrance for the next decade. He has already created at least a couple of dozen variations for different brands, and it's getting tougher to distinguish. I wish all those things were not consequences of this fragrance, because when it was first released and I got to smell it, I had no idea of Marc-Antoine. I knew Quentin Biche to some extent because of his Etat Libre creations, nothing more. I only recognized the name Ganymede, being Jupiter's satellite, because of my aerospace engineering background. And gosh, was it such a strange experience. I did not even know the now infamous Akigala wood material either, but it was immediately evident that this is distinctive. It was certainly a new paradigm, and it is going to be disruptive. It wasn't even popular for the first couple of years. It's only after he made Delina, Guidance, Bois Imperial, this one really blew up. So though I am not for a lot of things that happened as a result of this fragrance, I am very much a fan of this one in isolation. It has this otherworldly mandarin, a metallic mineralic edge. It transforms into something like concrete, the scent of dried flowers in a lab, the smell of radiant saffron, and this futuristic spaceship interior smelling suede leather. It's really fascinating. There's a sense of dislocated geometry, angular architecture, something very remote, but you can't stop being taken over. It's a truly distinct technical achievement. The engineer in me especially appreciates this a lot. Number 31, taking a break for a designer. This is the first fragrance from Tom Ford for his eponymous brand. From 2006, Black Orchid, composed by Pierre Nagrin and David Appel. I still remember smelling this for the first time and how decadent, narcotic, sensual and vintage inflected it smelled. There's even a video of Tom Ford talking with so much enthusiasm about how they used headspace technology, went to Lalique to create this Art Deco bottle and so forth. It has this berried, fruity side, this lush, ylang floral side, and of course the oriental, sheeper dimension with the velvety patchouli, sandalwood and amber. Everything anchored by this dark, decadent orchid accord. Some chocolate and truffle, adding this unusual color. The brief for this was responded with the composition of Noir de Noir, which is a brilliant fragrance in its own right. Of course, now it's part of the private blend. Black Orchid set the precedent for what the brand of Tom Ford would be. They could not have chosen a better first fragrance in my opinion. I feel like I'm in some sort of Middle Eastern outdoors party whenever I reach for this. It is worshipped in the fashion circles. I've heard from countless people in the industry how this has been their first option for a full black look. It also pays homage to bold, unapologetic, classic powerhouse creations and so forth. Just a decadent, dark twisted fantasy in a bottle. Let's go to another independent voice next. Never would I have imagined when I bought this from Joy Paris and saw 20 boxes of it sitting there that this would become the cult hit it is today. It is a very particular, intricate, art meets olfaction category of creation. From 2023, this is Rock, L'Objet Parfumant from Roberto Greco and Christopher Sheldrake. It's inspired by his introspection, being isolated during lockdown. It has this completely wild, composed accord in the beginning with cassis and violet, the ferality of Narcissus, which is a recurring theme in his three creations, especially using it to bring a humanistic side. There's a floral, rubbery, mushroomy osmanthus, deep, rich resins and dark leather, certainly animalic, horsey, agrestic aspects as well. There is this Alep soap accord which comes in later, very unusual. It's alive, it's breathing, it shifts, really contemplative. It is fit to be called olfactory art. Sheldrake somehow brings together his daring Lutens side and the articulate Chanel side at the same time. It might as well be my favorite release of the last 5 years. A true sensory experience every time I wear it. At 33 is another Chanel exclusive, Coromandel from 2007, composed by Jacques Polge and Sheldrake again. The most mentions of a perfumer on this list. In fact, there's another one next. Anyway, this takes its name from the exquisite Chinese lacquered screens that adorned Gabrielle Chanel's apartment. Something she cherished deeply. But for me, the name held a different kind of resonance long before I even knew it was a perfume. I had never heard of the lace exclusive collection. What drew me in was simply the name. Coromandel refers to a region on the southeastern coast of India where I grew up. That connection was enough to spark curiosity. Later I discovered the beautiful irony. The Chinese lacquer screens were originally traded through that very same Coromandel coast, which gave them, and eventually this perfume, their name. That revelation deepened my connection to the scent in an almost poetic way. The fragrance itself is masterful. It is a luxurious blend of Chanel's signature florals, covered in rich amber, notably benzoin. It is accentuated by frankincense, sandalwood, and perhaps the most elegantly polished, refined patchouli. It is softened by iris and a creamy vanilla benzoin accord, creating this warm, velvety aura. It is like a kaleidoscopic fragrance, sometimes warm and enveloping, other times luminous and buoyant. It feels like the presence of an optimistic, radiant friend, someone you can turn to for comfort and joy. People close to me still remember the scent and ask me about it. That kind of lasting impression is very rare. It also has a certain magical, mystical quality underneath. It has been years since I got to know it, but it remains as one of my all-time favorites. At 34, yet again a bridge-building brand, one of the best creative, artistic niche houses around, one of my all-time favorites, Serge Lutens. Again, where do I even start with Serge? Fianagui, Chêne, La Mire, Sarrazin, Borneo 1834, many great ones. But instead of trying to think out of the box or showing a bell jar, I decided to go with one that was my introduction to the brand, and I'm sure I did the same for many others. This is Chergui by Christopher Sheldrake. I have a couple of bottles of this, including 100 ml. I wear it basically year round, even summer. That's how much I love this one. I could have shown some rare bell jar that is more obscure and fascinating to me these days, but this still has a special place and history for me. I have always looked at this as a traditional amber which has traveled through the desert like a nomad for a long time and come back home. It opens rich, hay, tobacco, with the honey-glazed, sun-cured quality, a hint of smoke. There is this gauzy iris underneath, ambery, musky. The resins also carry the whole thing forward, warm, spicy, sweet, and ever so slightly decayed. It beautifully balances the dryness, the sweetness, and the resinous facets. Very comforting, exotic, and yet introspective. An all-time favorite from this legendary brand. Last, of course, there has to be a Frederic Malle, it being my favorite house and everything. But I decided to stop with one because I can't with 2 or 3 or 4. And I'm going with the modern classic Portrait of a Lady, another all-time favorite of mine. I've done a rundown of all the fragrances from the brand, including my other favorites, in another video on the channel. I've also discussed what the house means to me, its departure, some individual reviews as well. This fragrance has become a signature onto itself. You hear the name and everyone instantly knows what you're talking about. Bold, distinctive, unmistakable. Of course, its influence is now widespread. It's originally built on the foundation of Géranium pour Monsieur, with rose and other opulent elements to create something operatic. And what you get is this Baroque rose patchouli amber composition. Dramatic, full-bodied, yet charmful. It just feels like red velvet curtains, candlelight, and black gowns. Just a setting of theatrical opulence. But over time, I have come to see it differently. It's grown onto its own character that I can wear it as easily with a t-shirt and an expensive watch, and it will still feel right. I associate this scent with many special moments, memories of meeting important people in my life and so forth, all tied to this fragrance. Truly a landmark creation, one that I believe will be talked about, referenced, and admired for decades to come. With all that being said, let's see how the next 25 years of fragrances is going to be. If you're still here, as always, thanks for watching, take care, and ciao.